In the sweltering heat of Mexico City, the neon lights from the streets flickered as if trying to burn away the night. Jonathan Reeves, a former agent with a gleaming steel left arm, walked down a dark alley. Each of his footsteps echoed like a death knell. 15 years ago, Victor Russo, the notorious kingpin of the Black Eagle gang, had taken everything from him: Jonathan's beloved wife, her life, and his daughter, Emily Carter, the child he had never met. Now, after a long imprisonment for a crime he was framed for, Jonathan returned with a burning fire of vengeance in his heart. His mechanical arm, forged by his own hands during those dark days, was not just a weapon but also a symbol of his pain. It was crafted from cold steel, fitted with a sharp blade that could spring out at any moment. Each of Jonathan's punches carried immense power, capable of felling an enemy in a single blow. Today, he had crossed the border from the U.S., traversing the arid desert to reach Mexico City, where Victor had built his criminal empire. News of Emily, the 16-year-old girl who was his biological daughter, being raised by Victor as his own, was the sole motivation keeping Jonathan alive. At a border checkpoint, Jonathan disguised himself as a truck driver, wearing a baseball cap to hide his cold, sharp eyes. The guards, bribed by Victor, gave his papers a cursory check. A large, scar-faced guard tapped on the truck's window. "Open up the back," he ordered, his voice hoarse. Jonathan gave a faint smile, his right hand gripping the steering wheel, his steel arm vibrating slightly as if ready for action. "Nothing to check, my friend," Jonathan replied, his voice calm but as cold as ice. The scarred guard sneered, pulling out a dagger and pressing it against the window. "Open it, or I'll slit your throat." The other guards snickered, thinking they had the upper hand. But they didn't know that facing Jonathan was like walking willingly into the Grim Reaper's scythe. In a flash, Jonathan sprang up, his steel arm smashing against the window, shattering it. Before the scarred guard could react, he took a steel fist to the jaw, his teeth scattering. Two others rushed forward, one pulling a handgun. But Jonathan was faster. He spun around, delivering a roundhouse kick to the man's wrist, sending the gun flying. The last man swung a knife, but Jonathan parried the blade with his steel arm, then threw a punch into his chest, sending him flying back into a wall, unconscious. All three were down in less than 10 seconds, without a single gunshot. Jonathan dusted off his hands, picked up the fallen gun, checked the ammo, and moved on. He drove the truck through the checkpoint, heading deeper into Mexico City. Intelligence from an anonymous source indicated that Emily was chauffeured daily in a sleek black SUV, escorted by bodyguards. Victor kept her like a treasure, not out of love, but because he wanted to use Emily to psychologically manipulate his old enemy. Jonathan knew that to save his daughter, he would have to face the entire Black Eagle Empire, from its mercenaries to Victor's top assassin, Marcus Kane, a man as cold-blooded as himself. On a crowded street, Jonathan parked the truck, hiding in the shadows of a dingy bar. He watched the black SUV stop in front of a school. Emily, a girl with long brown hair, stepped out, her eyes carefree but with a hint of melancholy. Two large bodyguards accompanied her, one holding a rifle, the other scanning the surroundings. Jonathan clenched his steel fist, the blade within vibrating softly. This was his first chance to get close to his daughter. He stepped out, pretending to be a homeless man, and approached the SUV with a squeegee. "Clean your windows." Sirs, Jonathan's voice was low, concealing his killing intent. The bodyguard with the rifle growled, "Get lost, old man." But Jonathan didn't stop. He threw the squeegee in the bodyguard's face, startling him. In that instant, his steel arm swung up, breaking the man's wrist, and the rifle fell to the ground. The other guard drew a knife, but Jonathan launched a high kick, catching him on the chin and knocking him flat on his back. Emily screamed in panic, trying to run away. Jonathan pursued her, as fast as a panther. He vaulted over a fence, his steel hand gripping the wall, and climbed onto a roof to cut her off. When Emily looked back, he was standing in front of her, his eyes sharp but his voice gentle. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." But Emily didn't believe him. She screamed and swung her handbag at him. Jonathan easily dodged it, not wanting to frighten her further. He stepped back, raising his hands. "I just want to talk." Just then, the wail of police sirens echoed in the distance. Jonathan knew he was running out of time. He grabbed Emily, gently but firmly, and pulled her into the truck. "Stay still. I'll explain," he said, his voice full of authority. Emily struggled, but his steel arm held her fast, preventing her escape. The truck rolled forward, speeding into the Mexico City night, leaving the flickering lights and police sirens behind. He knew this journey had just begun. Victor Russo would not let Emily be taken so easily, and Marcus Kane, his hound, was lurking somewhere. Jonathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his steel arm glinting in the moonlight. His quest for revenge and to save his daughter would be bloody, but he was not afraid. For Emily, he was ready to face hell itself. Where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are? Leave a comment to let me know you're well and focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. The Mexico City sky sank into the violet hues of dusk, and the streetlights began to flicker, reflecting off the broken glass of old buildings. Jonathan Reeves drove the truck he had acquired from the checkpoint, weaving through the dense traffic. Beside him, Emily Carter sat huddled, her brown eyes flashing with a mix of panic and anger. She clenched her fists, trying to find a way to escape the mysterious man who had just kidnapped her. "Let me go." "You psycho," Emily screamed, her voice trembling but defiant. Jonathan didn't answer. His eyes focused on the road ahead. His steel arm held the steering wheel steady, the blade within vibrating slightly, as if sensing imminent danger. "You need to calm down," he said, his voice low but firm. "I am not your enemy." Emily glared at him. "Who are you? Why did you take me?" She tried to open the car door, but Jonathan had already disabled the locks. Suddenly, glaring headlights from behind shone directly into the rearview mirror. A sleek black SUV, identical to the one that had picked Emily up earlier, sped toward them like a predator. Jonathan glanced in the mirror, instantly recognizing the mark of the Black Eagle gang. "Hold on tight," he commanded, flooring the accelerator. The old truck roared to life, hurtling through an intersection, narrowly avoiding a bus. In the SUV, two of Victor Russo's bodyguards gritted their teeth, rifles in hand. The man in the passenger seat, with a snake tattoo on his face, yelled into a radio, "He's up ahead, shoot the tires." The driver, a muscular man with a shaved head, nodded and accelerated to close the distance. A burst of rifle fire erupted, tearing through the air. Jonathan swerved, the truck tilting precariously, dodging the first bullet. But another hit the rear tire, causing the vehicle to shake violently. Emily screamed, ducking and covering her head. Jonathan remained unfazed. He turned, his steel hand unlatching the window, and drew the handgun he had taken from the checkpoint. With a lightning-fast move, he leaned out and fired 2 shots. The first bullet hit the SUV's front tire, making it swerve. The second pierced the windshield, lodging squarely in the driver's shoulder. The SUV lost control and crashed into a lamppost, smoke billowing from the wreckage. But the danger wasn't over. A powerful motorcycle shot out from a side alley, its rider clad in black leather with a helmet obscuring his face. It was Marcus Kane, Victor's top assassin, nicknamed the Black Panther for his speed and ruthlessness. Marcus drew a pistol, firing repeatedly at the truck. Jonathan ducked low as bullets grazed over his head, leaving a scorched black mark on the truck's roof. "Don't move," Jonathan yelled at Emily, breaking the steering column with his steel hand to make a sharp turn into a narrow street. Marcus's motorcycle stayed close behind, weaving through trash cans and vendor carts. Jonathan threw the empty handgun behind him, hitting Marcus in the shoulder, causing him to wobble but not fall. "Persistent bastard," Jonathan muttered, a murderous glint in his eyes. He brought the truck to a sudden stop in front of a bustling night market. "Run," he shouted, pulling Emily out of the vehicle, panicked but with no other choice. She followed him into the crowd. Marcus abandoned his motorcycle and gave chase, a gleaming dagger in his hand. Jonathan led Emily through the stalls, the air filled with the smell of tacos and the sound of salsa music. Suddenly, Marcus appeared in front of them, his knife slashing towards Jonathan's chest. The former agent reacted in an instant, his steel arm blocking the blade with a deafening clash of metal. Jonathan delivered a kick to Marcus's stomach, sending him stumbling back a few steps. The crowd screamed and fled in terror. Emily hid behind a stall, her eyes wide, as she watched her father confront the assassin. Marcus smirked, drawing a second pistol. But Jonathan had already lunged forward, smashing his steel hand against Marcus's wrist and sending the gun flying. A hand-to-hand battle erupted. Marcus, a master martial artist, threw a hook punch at Jonathan's jaw, but he dodged it and countered with a steel fist to Marcus's chest, sending him crashing into a fruit stand, scattering oranges and limes everywhere. Marcus sprang back up, launching a high kick, but Jonathan blocked it with his steel arm. He spun and locked him in a chokehold. "You're not strong enough," Jonathan growled, but Marcus broke free, stabbing a knife into his shoulder. Blood flowed, but Jonathan didn't slow down. He activated the blade in his steel arm, slashing horizontally and forcing Marcus to retreat. The crowd had completely dispersed, leaving the street in chaos. Emily suddenly screamed. "Watch out!" One of Victor's henchmen was firing from behind. Jonathan pushed Emily to the ground, rolled to avoid the bullets, then jumped up and kicked the man in the face, knocking him out. Marcus seized the opportunity to dash for a gun, but Jonathan had already pulled Emily into another alley. They hid in an abandoned warehouse, their ragged breaths echoing in the darkness. Jonathan checked the wound on his shoulder, his shirt soaked red with blood. Emily looked at him, a mixture of fear and curiosity in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jonathan turned, his gaze softening. "I'm the only one who wants to save you, Emily. But now is not the time for explanations." He stood up, his steel arm gleaming in the dark. "We have to get out of here before Marcus finds us." The roar of car engines echoed outside the warehouse. Jonathan knew that the hunt by Victor Russo and Marcus Kane had only just begun. He clenched his fist, ready for the next fight. Jonathan Reeves leaned against a tree, the faint moonlight glinting off his steel arm. Beside him, Emily Carter huddled, her brown eyes filled with suspicion as she watched the strange man who had just saved her from the chase in the market. The wound on Jonathan's shoulder was still bleeding, but he paid it no mind. The threat from Victor Russo and the assassin Marcus Kane was closing in, and time was not on his side. "Who are you?" "Really?" Emily spoke up, her voice trembling but sharp. "If you're not a kidnapper, then why did you drag me into this mess?" Jonathan sighed, pulling an old photograph from his jacket pocket and handing it to her. It was a picture of him and a young woman with brown hair like Emily's point, smiling brightly by the sea. "This is your mother," he said, his voice low, "and I am your real father." "Emily." The girl looked at the photo, her hand trembling. "You're lying. My father is Victor. He raised me since I was a child." Emily screamed, throwing the photo to the ground. Jonathan didn't pick it up, only looked at her with patient eyes. "Victor Russo took your mother from me, framed me for a bank robbery. I was imprisoned for 15 years. And your mother, she died because of him." He paused, his voice choking. "I came here to get you away from that monster." Emily shook her head, jumping to her feet, about to run. But Jonathan was faster, his steel arm grabbing her wrist. Gently but firmly, "Listen to me. You're not safe with Victor. He's using you to manipulate people, to maintain his power." Emily struggled. "Let me go, I don't believe you." She kicked him hard in the leg, then darted into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. Jonathan cursed and gave chase. Tree branches whipped across his face, but he didn't slow down. The rustling of leaves mixed with Emily's frantic breathing up ahead. Suddenly, headlights flashed in the distance, accompanied by the roar of an engine. A jeep stopped at the edge of the forest, and 4 thugs jumped out, armed with rifles and daggers. They were Victor's mercenaries, bounty hunters sent to capture Emily. Jonathan hid behind a tree trunk, watching. Emily stopped near an abandoned gas station, panting, unaware of the approaching danger. A thug with long hair tied in a ponytail spotted her, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "Come with us, little miss. Be a good girl." He drew a knife and advanced. Emily screamed, backing away, and tripped over an old fuel drum. Just then, Jonathan burst out like a whirlwind. His steel arm swung up, striking the long-haired man's wrist hard, sending the knife flying. Before he could react, he took a kick to the chest that sent him flying back into a fuel drum, collapsing. The remaining 3 charged forward, one firing a rifle. But Jonathan rolled to dodge the bullet, picked up the knife from the ground, and threw it straight into the shooter's shoulder. The man screamed and collapsed. The second man, built like a bear, swung an iron pipe at Jonathan's head. He blocked it with his steel arm, snapping the pipe in 2, then delivered a punch to the jaw that sent the man sprawling. The last one drew a pistol, but Jonathan was already on him, locking his arm, twisting his wrist back, and smashing his head against the fuel drum. A dry crack of breaking bone echoed. Emily stood frozen, watching her father take down the whole group like a killing machine. But the danger wasn't over. A bullet grazed Jonathan's ear, leaving a searing mark. Marcus Kane emerged from the shadows, the pistol in his hand glinting. "You're persistent, Reeves," Marcus growled, reloading. Jonathan pushed Emily behind him, shielding her. "Give me the girl, or I'll blow your brains out." Jonathan didn't answer, his eyes locked on Marcus. He picked up a broken piece of steel from the ground and threw it hard, hitting Marcus's hand and making him drop the gun. The assassin roared and lunged with a flurry of martial arts, moves, punches, kicks, and locks. Jonathan retaliated, his steel arm blocking a punch before he delivered a hook kick to Marcus's jaw. He fell back but sprang up immediately, pulling out a dagger and stabbing repeatedly. Jonathan dodged. The blade in his steel arm sprang out, and he slashed sideways, leaving a cut on Marcus's jacket. The fight turned into a brutal street brawl. Marcus threw a roundhouse kick, hitting Jonathan's injured shoulder and making him falter. But the former agent didn't give up. He charged forward, put Marcus in a headlock, slammed his head against a tree, and then delivered a steel fist to his gut, causing him to double over. Emily screamed, "Stop!" But Jonathan didn't stop. He wanted to finish Marcus. Just then, the sound of police sirens echoed in the distance, forcing him to stop. Jonathan grabbed Emily and pulled her deeper into the forest. "We have to go now," he yelled. Emily, though still suspicious, had no choice but to follow. They hid in a small cave where the moonlight couldn't penetrate. Jonathan checked his wound, blood soaking his shirt. "You have to trust me," he said, his voice hoarse. "Victor isn't your father. He's the one who destroyed our family." Emily was silent, her expression wavering. She held the photo of her mother, her heart filled with conflict. In the distance, the sound of engines roared again. Marcus and Victor's men hadn't given up. Jonathan clenched his steel fist, ready for the next battle. The wind howled through the ancient streets of Madrid, Spain. Mixing with the distant roar of engines, Jonathan Reeves sat in a beat-up old truck, hastily bandaging the wound on his shoulder. Beside him, Emily Carter clutched a photo of her mother, her eyes flickering between fear and doubt. After the fight in the Mexican jungle, they had crossed the border in the dead of night, fleeing from Marcus Kane and Victor Russo's mercenaries. But fate wasn't done with them. New intelligence revealed that Victor had a secret base in Madrid, where he ran a transnational drug ring. Jonathan knew that to save Emily, he had to get her out of Victor's reach. But first, he had to survive. The truck pulled into a deserted gas station on the outskirts of Madrid. Jonathan turned to Emily, his voice low but firm. "Stay here. I'm going to get some fuel." The girl nodded, but her eyes remained wary. He stepped out, his steel arm gleaming under the gas station's neon lights. Suddenly, a blaze of headlights from 4 jeeps appeared, surrounding the station. A group of bounty hunters, about 8 of them, jumped out, armed with rifles and daggers, their eyes darting around like a pack of wolves. Jonathan immediately recognized the danger. "Emily, get down," he shouted, rolling behind a fuel pump to avoid the first volley of bullets. Gunshots rang out, bullets tearing through the air and shattering the gas station's windows. Emily cowered, covering her head, her heart pounding. One of the bounty hunters, his face covered in tattoos, roared, "Take the girl alive. Kill the man." Jonathan didn't wait. He jumped up, his steel arm slamming into a fuel drum, sending it rolling toward the thugs and causing chaos. One man fired his rifle, but Jonathan had already rolled, grabbing a shard of broken glass from the ground and throwing it straight into the man's wrist, making him drop his weapon. He lunged forward, delivering a roundhouse kick to the second man's jaw, knocking him flat on his back. The third man swung a knife, but Jonathan blocked it with his steel arm, shattering the blade, then punched him squarely in the chest, sending him flying into a gas pump, unconscious. The remaining men split into 2 groups, one providing covering fire from a distance while the other moved in for close combat. Jonathan drew a pistol from his belt and fired 3 quick shots, taking down 2 men hiding behind a jeep. A bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing open his old wound. But he didn't slow down. He leaped onto the hood of the truck, using it as a launch pad to hurl himself at the man with the machine gun. A steel fist connected with his face, and the man dropped instantly, Jonathan rolled, dodging a spray of bullets from the last man, then activated the blade in his steel arm and slashed sideways, felling him as blood pooled on the ground. But the danger wasn't over. A heavy motorcycle roared up, and Marcus Kane appeared, his black leather jacket gleaming under the lights. He drew 2 pistols and fired relentlessly at Jonathan. He rolled, using the truck for cover, but Emily suddenly screamed, "Watch out!" A surviving thug was about to stab Jonathan in the back. He spun around, his steel arm blocking the blade, then kicked the man in the stomach, sending him flying into a fuel pump and causing a small explosion. Marcus seized the opportunity to charge, unleashing a flurry of martial arts moves, hooks, high kicks, and arm locks. Jonathan countered, his steel arm blocking a punch before kicking Marcus in the knee, making him buckle. But Marcus turned the tables, stabbing a dagger into Jonathan's thigh. Drawing blood, he roared, activating the blade in his steel arm and slashing sideways. But Marcus dodged it, smirking. "You're finished, Reeves." Just then, Emily acted. She picked up a fallen gun and tremblingly aimed it at Marcus. "Let him go!" she screamed. Marcus turned, scoffing. The girl's got guts. He raised his gun, but Jonathan charged, putting all his strength into a steel-fisted punch to Marcus's chest that sent him flying backward into a dumpster. But in that chaotic moment, another thug jumped out of a jeep, grabbed Emily, and pressed a gun to her head. "Drop your weapon, or the girl dies," the man yelled. Jonathan clenched his fist, but was forced to throw his gun down. Marcus got up, wiped the blood from his lips, and signaled his men to tie Emily up, take her to Madrid. He ordered, "Victor is waiting." Emily struggled, but she was dragged into a jeep and disappeared into the night. Jonathan, left alone in the burning gas station, slammed his steel fist into the ground, cracking the pavement. He knew Victor had taken Emily to his base in Madrid, a bar that served as a front in the city center. The wounds on his shoulder and thigh were bleeding, but the fire of vengeance inside him burned hotter than ever. He picked up a rifle from a fallen enemy, checked the ammunition, then got on Marcus's motorcycle and sped into the darkness, heading for Madrid. In his mind, there was only one thought: save Emily. Even if it meant facing Victor Russo's entire empire. The roar of the engine blended into the night, signaling a brutal battle to come. The thick smell of tequila and cigarette smoke filled the El Fuego bar in downtown Madrid, Spain. Flashing red neon lights illuminated drunken faces and frenzied dancing. Jonathan Reeves stood in the shadows outside the door, his steel arm hidden beneath a leather jacket, his cold eyes scanning the crowd. He had tracked Emily Carter here, to this secret base, where she was taken by Victor Russo's men, a bar fronting the Black Eagle gang's smuggling operation. Somewhere in this building, Emily was being held captive, and Marcus Kane, Victor's attack dog, was lurking. Jonathan pushed the door open and stepped inside, the pounding salsa music drowning out the sound of his leather boots on the floor. He was disguised as a liquor dealer, wearing a baseball cap pulled low to hide the scar on his face. The bar was packed, but he immediately spotted 4 of Victor's guards stationed in the corners, their hands near the guns hidden in their jackets. A large, bald-headed man stared at him intently. Jonathan pretended to order a shot of tequila, but the steel arm under his jacket was ready to deploy its blade. Suddenly, his eyes caught a steel door at the end of a hallway, guarded by 2 men with rifles. That had to be the entrance to the basement where Emily was being held. Jonathan stood up, pretending to be drunk, and staggered toward the door. "Hey, where's the restroom?" he asked, slurring his words. The guard sneered. "Get lost." This ain't for you. But before the man could draw his weapon, Jonathan made his move. The steel arm swung up, punching the guard square in the face, sending him flying into the wall with blood gushing from his nose. The second guard raised his rifle, but Jonathan spun and kicked his wrist, breaking it and making the gun clatter to the floor. The commotion drew the crowd's attention, and the music stopped abruptly. The 4 guards in the bar charged. Drawing knives and pistols, Jonathan vaulted over the bar, using it as cover, and rolled to dodge the first volley of shots. Glass shattered everywhere, and liquor spilled across the floor. He grabbed a broken tequila bottle and threw it straight into the nearest man's face, making him scream and clutch his eyes. Jonathan burst out, delivering a steel fist to the second man's chest with the crack of breaking ribs. The third man fired his pistol, but he leaned away as the blade from his steel arm shot out, slashing sideways and severing the man's gun strap. A hook kick to the jaw sent him to the floor. The last one, built like a bear, swung an iron pipe, but Jonathan blocked it with his steel arm, snapping the pipe, then punched him in the stomach, causing him to double over. Wheezing, the crowd screamed and scattered in panic. Jonathan didn't stop, running to the steel door and kicking it hard, forcing it open. A dark staircase led down to a basement. He drew the pistol he had picked up and descended, each footstep echoing like the heartbeat of death. At the bottom of the stairs, Emily was tied to a chair, her mouth taped shut, her eyes wide with fear. Next to her was Marcus Kane, wiping his dagger blade, a sinister smile on his face. "Welcome to Madrid, Reeves," Marcus said, his voice as cold as ice. "You think you can save the girl?" He drew his pistol and fired repeatedly. Jonathan rolled as bullets slammed into the wall, sending dust flying. He leaped up, using his steel arm to block a knife thrust from Marcus, then kicked him in the knee, making him stagger. Marcus retaliated with a series of martial arts moves, hooks, side kicks, and a chokehold. Jonathan dodged, but a punch landed on his injured shoulder, causing him to falter as blood soaked through his shirt. Emily struggled, trying to scream through the tape. Jonathan regained his composure, activated the blade in his steel arm, and slashed sideways, forcing Marcus back. The duel erupted. Marcus threw a high kick to Jonathan's chest, but he blocked it with his steel arm, spun to lock his opponent's arm, and slammed Marcus's head into the wall. He roared and drew a second gun, but Jonathan was faster, smashing his steel fist into his wrist and sending the weapon flying. A roundhouse kick connected with Marcus's face, knocking him backward with blood trickling from his lip. Jonathan ran over, cut Emily's ropes, and ripped the tape from her mouth. "Go," he yelled, pushing her toward the stairs. But Marcus wasn't down yet. He picked up a gun and fired a shot. The bullet grazing Jonathan's arm, he turned back, charged, and delivered a final steel-fisted punch to Marcus's chest, sending him crashing into a wooden crate. Unconscious, Emily stood frozen, watching her father fight like an unstoppable machine. They ran up the stairs and burst out through a fire exit. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Mixing with the screams from inside the bar, Jonathan pulled Emily onto the motorcycle he had left outside and sped into the Madrid night. "Hold on tight," he commanded, blood from his wound dripping onto the seat. Emily held on to him, not resisting for the first time, but her heart was still filled with doubt. Behind them, the headlights of a Jeep flashed. Victor Russo knew where they were, and Marcus Kane wouldn't stop. Jonathan tightened his grip on the throttle, knowing this battle was only the beginning. Emily was the key, and he would do anything to protect her. The motorcycle they took from the El Fuego bar had run out of gas, forcing them to hide behind smelly trash cans. The wounds on Jonathan's shoulder and thigh ached, but he showed no hint of weakness. Emily, clutching a photograph of her mother, looked at him with a mix of belief and doubt. After the bloody battle, she began to sense the sincerity from the man who claimed to be her father. But her heart was still in turmoil. "Are you telling the truth?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "That Victor isn't my father." Jonathan sat down, leaning his back against the cold wall, and took an old silver ring from his pocket. "Your mother wore this ring when I proposed to her," he said, handing the ring to Emily. "Victor Rousseau stole her from me and framed me for a bank robbery. He killed your mother when she tried to run away with you." He paused, his eyes blurring with memories. "I'm here to make things right." "Emily." The girl took the ring, her fingers trembling, but before she could answer, blinding headlights swept across the alley. A black SUV sped towards them, its tires screeching on the pavement. Marcus Kane, Victor's assassin, stepped out, two pistols gleaming under the moonlight. "Found you, Reeves," he growled, chambering around. Three henchmen jumped out of the vehicle, holding rifles, their eyes darting around like a pack of wolves. Jonathan pulled Emily behind a dumpster, whispering, "Don't move." He drew the handgun he had picked up from the bar and checked the ammunition. Only 3 rounds left. Marcus gave a signal, and the henchman opened fire, bullets tearing through the dumpster, sending metal fragments flying everywhere. Jonathan rolled, pulling Emily into another alley as a bullet grazed his shoulder, drawing more blood. They stopped behind a broken brick wall. Jonathan watched, seeing Marcus in the lead, moving like a stalking predator. He picked up a piece of brick and threw it hard to the opposite side. Creating a diversion, 2 henchmen ran over, guns aimed at the shadows. Jonathan lunged out, his steel fist crashing straight into the first man's face, the crack of his nose bone audible. The second man turned, but Jonathan had already delivered a kick to his knee, causing him to fall, then slammed his head against the wall, knocking him unconscious. Marcus spotted them and fired a burst from a distance. Jonathan pushed Emily to the ground and rolled to dodge. Grabbing a dagger from the fallen henchman, he threw the knife, hitting Marcus in the shoulder, which made him pause. But the assassin was too tough. Marcus pulled the knife out and charged forward with a series of martial arts moves: a hook punch, a sidekick, a chokehold. Jonathan blocked with his steel hand and threw a punch at Marcus's chest, but he dodged it. Countering with a kick to Jonathan's wounded thigh, Jonathan gritted his teeth, deployed the blade in his steel hand, and slashed sideways, leaving a cut across Marcus's shirt. The street fight exploded. Marcus threw a roundhouse kick, hitting Jonathan's shoulder and making him stagger, but the former agent didn't go down. He leaped forward, put Marcus in a headlock, and slammed his head into the brick wall. Drawing blood, Marcus roared, stabbing his knife into Jonathan's hip. But Jonathan endured the pain and delivered a final steel punch to his face, knocking him backward and rendering him temporarily unconscious. Emily screamed, "Watch out!" The last henchman, hiding behind the SUV, fired his rifle. Jonathan pulled Emily through the alley as bullets slammed into the wall, kicking up clouds of dust. They took refuge in an abandoned store with a shattered glass front. Jonathan checked the new wound on his hip, blood soaking his shirt red. "You have to trust me," he panted. "Victor doesn't love you. He's only using you for leverage." Emily looked at the silver ring, her heart in turmoil. "If you're my father, why did you abandon me for 15 years?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears. Jonathan took her hand. "I didn't abandon you. I was imprisoned, stripped of everything, but I'm here now. And I won't let Victor or Marcus lay a hand on you." The roar of an engine echoed outside the store. Jonathan pulled Emily out the back door and ran into a nearby night market. The smell of street food and the sound of flamenco music filled the air. But he knew Marcus wouldn't give up. He had Emily hide behind a flower stall while he scanned the crowd. "We have to get to the airport," he whispered. "I'll take you to America, where you'll be safe." Emily nodded, but her eyes were still full of doubt. She clutched the ring, as if it were the only thread connecting her to the truth. In the distance, Marcus's silhouette glided by, his eyes flashing like a predator's. Jonathan clenched his steel fist, ready for the next battle. He knew that to protect Emily, he would have to face both Victor Russo and the monster, Marcus Kane. The flamenco music was still lively, but it couldn't drown out the pounding of their hearts. Jonathan knelt low, his steel arm tensed, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of Marcus Kane. The wound on his hip was bleeding, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. Emily, clutching her mother's silver ring, was beginning to believe Jonathan's story, but her heart was still in turmoil. "If you're my father, why did Victor raise me as his own daughter?" she whispered, her voice trailing off. Before Jonathan could answer, Emily suddenly stood up, her eyes lighting up as she saw a public phone booth at the end of the market. "I have to call Victor. He'll save me," she said, then dashed off before Jonathan could stop her. He cursed and ran after her, but the dense crowd slowed him down. Emily reached the phone booth, shakily picked up the receiver, and dialed the number. "Victor, help me. Some guy has kidnapped me," she screamed into the phone. Jonathan grabbed her and pulled her away from the booth. But it was too late. A black SUV sped towards them, its tires screeching on the stone street. Marcus Kane stepped out, his black leather jacket gleaming, 2 pistols in his hands. "You're a real nuisance, Reeves," he sneered, signaling for 3 of his henchmen to surround them. Jonathan pushed Emily behind him and drew his handgun, but there was only 1 bullet left. "Run, Emily," he yelled, but the girl stood frozen, unwilling to leave him behind. Marcus opened fire, a bullet grazing Jonathan's shoulder and drawing blood. He rolled, using the flower stall as cover, and fired his last bullet, hitting one of the henchmen in the leg. The man fell, screaming in pain. Jonathan charged forward, his steel fist smashing into the second man's face, sending him flying into a fruit stand, scattering oranges everywhere. The third man lunged with a dagger, but Jonathan blocked it with his steel hand, shattering the blade, then delivered a kick to his chest that sent him crashing into a lamppost, knocking him out cold. Marcus didn't wait. He rushed in, unleashing a flurry of martial arts attacks: a hook punch, a high kick, a chokehold. Jonathan fought back, blocking a punch with his steel hand and aiming a kick at Marcus's knee, but he dodged it and stabbed his knife into Jonathan's hip, right where the old wound hadn't healed. Jonathan roared, deployed the blade in his steel hand, and slashed sideways, but Marcus retreated and threw a small knife, which struck Jonathan in the shoulder. Blood flowed, but Jonathan didn't foul. He lunged forward, put Marcus in a headlock, and slammed his head against a wall, drawing blood. But Marcus was too resilient. He broke free and delivered a kick to Jonathan's chest, sending him stumbling backward into a shattered market stall. Emily screamed, picked up a shard of broken glass, and threw it at Marcus, but he dodged it easily. The girls got courage. Marcus laughed, walking over and pressing his gun to Emily's head. "Stay put, Reeves, or I'll blow her skull to pieces." Jonathan, bunting heavily, his shirt soaked red with blood, was forced to raise his hands in surrender. Marcus gave a signal, and two henchmen jumped out of the SUV, tied Jonathan's hands with rope, and dragged him into the vehicle. Emily struggled, but Marcus grabbed her by the hair and shoved her into the back seat. "Victor wants to see both of you," he said, his voice cold. The SUV sped away, leaving the chaotic market behind with its wrecked stalls and the screams of civilians. Inside the vehicle, Jonathan was tied tightly, but his eyes remained sharp and cold. He looked at Emily, trying to reassure her with his gaze. "Don't be afraid. I will get you out of here," he whispered. Emily didn't answer, but she clutched the silver ring as if it were her last hope. Marcus, sitting in the front seat, turned around with a sinister smile. "You think you're a hero? Reeves, Victor will tear you limb from limb before you can even touch the girl." The vehicle stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Madrid. Jonathan was dragged out, his hands still bound, blood from his wounds dripping onto the concrete floor. Emily was pulled inside, where dim lights revealed crates packed with narcotics. Marcus kicked Jonathan in the back, forcing him to his knees. "Kneel." "Agent," he sneered. "Your time is up." Jonathan gritted his teeth, his steel hand vibrating slightly. The ropes wouldn't hold him for long. He could feel the blade within his steel hand, ready to slice through his bonds at any moment. But he didn't move yet. He needed the perfect moment to save Emily and take down Marcus. From a distance, footsteps echoed. A tall silhouette appeared in the light. Victor Russo, dressed in a black suit with a cruel smile, stepped into view. "Reeves, you're as persistent as a leech," Victor said, his voice a low hiss. "But this time, you won't get away." He looked at Emily, his expression softening for a moment. "The girl is mine. You're not worthy of being her father." Jonathan clenched his fist, and the blade in his steel hand slid out slightly. The final battle was approaching, and he knew that to save Emily, he would have to spill much more blood. Darkness enveloped the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, where the smell of machine oil and gunpowder mixed in the air. Jonathan Reeves knelt on the cold concrete floor, his hands bound tightly, blood dripping from the wounds on his hip and shoulder. In front of him, Emily Carter was tied to a wooden chair, her brown eyes wide with fear, but still glinting with resilience. Victor Russo, the kingpin of the Black Eagle gang, stood in the middle of the warehouse, his immaculate black suit a stark contrast to the cruel smile on his face. Beside him stood Marcus Kane, the assassin with ice-cold eyes, wiping Jonathan's blood from his dagger. "Reeves, you truly are stubborn," Victor said, his voice low yet full of authority. He walked closer to Emily and gently stroked her brown hair, making her shudder. "Emily is my daughter. Do you think you can just take her away from me?" Jonathan gritted his teeth, his steel arm vibrating slightly, the blade within ready to deploy. "Victor, you're the one who killed her mother and framed me. Emily is my daughter, not yours," he growled, his voice filled with hatred. Victor laughed loudly and turned to Marcus. "Listen to this guy. A convict dares to claim he's a father." He pulled out a pistol and pressed it to Jonathan's forehead. 15 years ago, I hired Marcus to kidnap your wife to shut her up, but he took it upon himself to kill her, ruining my plan." Marcus smirked, showing no remorse. "She was stubborn, just like you." "Reeves." Hearing these words, Emily's eyes widened and tears streamed down her face. You killed my mother," she whispered. Looking at Victor, he shook his head, his voice softening. "No, Emily." That was Marcus, I loved your mother, but she wanted to take you away. So I had to take action. Jonathan roared. You're lying. You ordered Marcus to do it. You were behind the whole thing. Victor shrugged and signaled to Marcus. Take the girl away. I'll deal with Reeves. Marcus grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her from the chair. But she struggled, screaming. Let me go. Jonathan seized the opportunity, and the blade in his steel hand sliced through the ropes. He leaped to his feet and delivered a steel punch to the face of a nearby henchman, sending the man flying into a wooden crate, knocking him unconscious. Marcus turned, drew his pistol, and fired repeatedly. Jonathan rolled, using a metal barrel as a shield, as bullets slammed into it with a deafening clang. He vaulted over the barrel and delivered a roundhouse kick to Marcus's wrist, sending the gun flying. The assassin roared and charged in with a flurry of martial arts, moves a hook punch, a high kick, a chokehold. Jonathan blocked with his steel hand and countered with a punch to Marcus's chest, making him stumble back. But Marcus was too fast, plunging his dagger into Jonathan's shoulder, drawing a spray of blood. Emily screamed, picked up a piece of wood from the floor, and hit Marcus on the back. But he just laughed and pushed her to the ground. Jonathan seized the opening, deployed the blade in his steel hand, and slashed sideways, leaving a gash across Marcus's shirt. The fight raged inside the warehouse. Jonathan delivered a kick to Marcus's knee, making him buckle, then put him in a headlock and slammed his head against the metal barrel. Marcus broke free and punched Jonathan's wounded hip, causing him to falter as more blood soaked his shirt. Suddenly, Victor fired his gun, the bullet whistling past Jonathan's ear. That's enough, he yelled, pressing his gun to Emily's head. Stop it, Reeves, or the girl dies. Jonathan, panting for breath, let go, and the blade in his steel hand retracted. Marcus got to his feet, blood dripping from his lip, and gave a sinister smile. You've lost, Agent. Victor stepped forward, looking at Jonathan with contempt. You want to save Emily? Fine. I'll give you a chance. He turned to Marcus. Take them to the factory in Madrid. I want them both to witness the end. Marcus nodded, signaling his men to tie up Jonathan and Emily and shove them into a truck. Inside the truck, Jonathan looked at Emily, his eyes full of determination. Don't be afraid. I'll get you out of here, he whispered. Emily, though terrified, clutched the silver ring and nodded. She was beginning to believe Jonathan was her father, but her heart still ached from the truth about Victor. Marcus, sitting in the front seat, turned back. Enjoy it. Reeves, the factory will be your grave. The truck sped through the dark streets of Madrid, heading toward the abandoned factory where Victor had prepared a deadly trap. Jonathan clenched his steel hand, the blade inside vibrating slightly. He knew the final battle was approaching, and to save Emily, he had to face both Victor Russo and Marcus Kane in an unforgiving fight. Blood would be shed, but he was willing to pay the price to protect his daughter, Jonathan Reeves. His hands loosely tied, blood from the wounds on his hip and shoulder dripped onto the cement floor. He stood among Victor Russo's henchmen, his sharp gaze fixed on Emily Carter, who was chained to a massive conveyor belt leading straight to an ore-crushing blade. Victor, in a black suit, stood on a steel staircase, smiling sinisterly. Beside him, Marcus Kane, the assassin with a gleaming dagger, watched Jonathan like a predator. Reeves, you want to save the girl. Let's see how fast you are. Victor growled, pressing a button to start the conveyor belt. The sound of screeching metal filled the air. and Emily screamed in terror as the belt began to move, pulling her toward the blade. An old screen on the wall lit up, displaying a countdown timer, 12 seconds. You have 12 seconds to save her, or she'll be torn to pieces. Victor laughed. Jonathan clenched his steel hand. The blade within sprang out, cutting the ropes in an instant. He looked directly at Victor, his gaze as calm as a brewing storm. "You will pay," he said, his voice as cold as ice. Marcus lunged forward, blocking the way, drawing 2 pistols and firing repeatedly. Jonathan rolled, using a metal barrel as a shield. The bullets embedding themselves with a deafening clang. He leaped up, delivering a kick to Marcus's wrist that sent one gun flying, then smashed his steel fist into his chest, forcing him back. Victor's henchmen, about 5 of them, charged forward, wielding daggers and iron pipes. Jonathan didn't slow down. Espun, slashing his steel blade horizontally, cutting through the first man's pipe, then kicked him in the knee, bringing him down. The second man swung a dagger, but Jonathan blocked with his steel hand, breaking the man's wrist, then smashed his head against a machine, splattering blood. The third fired a rifle, but Jonathan rolled, grabbed an iron bar, and hurled it straight into the man's chest, knocking him backward. Marcus returned, unleashing a flurry of martial arts moves, hooks, high kicks, a chokehold. Jonathan retaliated, his steel hand blocking a punch and delivering a kick to Marcus's stomach that sent him crashing into a bin of ore. The assassin roared, drew his dagger, and stabbed repeatedly. Jonathan dodged, but one blade grazed his hip, drawing more blood. He extended the blade in his steel hand, slashing horizontally, leaving a deep cut on Marcus's shoulder. He knelt, but still grinned sinisterly. "You can't win, Reeves." The countdown timer showed 8 seconds left. Emily screamed, "Dad, save me!" Jonathan glanced at the screen, then at Victor, still on the staircase, his gun aimed at him. Jonathan remained calm, his eyes locked on Victor, as if measuring his every move. He picked up a pistol from a dead henchman, fired 2 shots, hitting Victor in the leg and forcing him to his knees. Dropping his gun, Jonathan rushed toward the stairs, but Marcus blocked his path, kicking him in the chest and sending him reeling backward. 4 seconds left. Jonathan was out of time. He rolled, avoiding a knife thrust from Marcus, then leaped up, locked him in a chokehold, and slammed Marcus's head against the railing, knocking him unconscious. He ran to the control panel, but it had been disabled. Victor, though wounded, laughed loudly. "You've lost." But Jonathan didn't give up. He looked at Emily and yelled, "The necklace. Throw it into the gears, Emily." Though panicked, understood. She took off the diamond necklace, a gift from her mother, and threw it hard into the conveyor belt's gears. The diamonds jammed the mechanism, causing the machine to screech and then stop, just inches from the blade. Emily gasped for breath, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan ran to her, cut her chains, and pulled her off the conveyor belt. "You're safe now," he whispered, holding Emily tightly. But Victor wasn't down. He picked up his gun and fired a shot, the bullet grazing Jonathan's shoulder. He pushed Emily behind him and lunged forward, his steel fist slamming into Victor's chest, sending him tumbling down the stairs. Jonathan stood tall, looking down at Victor, his voice cold. "You took everything from me. Now it's your turn." He raised his steel hand, the blade extending, ready to end it. But Marcus regained consciousness and, from behind, stabbed Jonathan in the back. As blood spurted out, he roared, "I spun around," and delivered a steel punch to Marcus's face, sending him flying into a wall. Unconscious again, Victor seized the opportunity, staggered to his feet, and ran toward the exit. Jonathan gave chase, but the blood loss slowed him down. Emily ran to him, supporting him. "Dad? Don't chase him, he's not worth it." Jonathan stopped, bunting, and looked at Emily. For the first time, she had called him Dad. He squeezed her hand, knowing the fight wasn't over. But in this moment, they had won. The factory was silent, filled only with the sound of the father and daughter's breathing and the cooling of metal. The first light of dawn broke over the Madrid, Spain sky, casting weak rays through the crumbling walls of the abandoned factory. Jonathan Reeves stood there, his shirt stained red with blood, his steel arm still gleaming despite being covered in scratches. Emily Carter stood beside him, her brown eyes welling with tears, her hand clutching her mother's silver ring. Having just escaped the ore-crushing blade, the father and daughter now faced the final chapter of their battle. Victor Rousseau, the head of the Black Eagle Syndicate, stumbled near the exit, his leg wounded, but his eyes still burned with madness. Marcus Kane, the relentless assassin, lay unconscious on the floor, but Jonathan knew he could wake up at any moment. "Emily, stand back," Jonathan commanded, his voice low but firm. He stepped forward, the blade in his steel hand, extending, ready to end all scores. Victor smirked, pulling a pistol from his suit jacket, though his hand was trembling. "You think you've won?" "Reeves, I'm the king here," he roared, firing. Jonathan rolled, the bullet grazing his shoulder, tearing open the old wound. He didn't slow down, lunging forward, his steel fist smashing into Victor's wrist, sending the gun flying. Victor didn't give up, drawing a dagger and stabbing repeatedly. Jonathan blocked with his steel hand, the blades clashing and creating sparks. He delivered a kick to Victor's stomach, sending him crashing into a pile of metal barrels with a deafening clang. Emily screamed, "Dad!" "Be careful." Marcus Kane woke up, blood streaming from his forehead, but he still charged forward, holding a sharp iron rod, aiming for Jonathan's back. He spun around, blocking the rod with his steel hand, then delivered a punch to Marcus's face, knocking him backward as blood splattered. A three-way battle erupted. Victor got up, grabbed his gun, and fired repeatedly. But Jonathan used a piece of sheet metal as a shield, the bullets embedding with a harsh clang. Marcus attacked from the side, unleashing a flurry of martial arts, moves, hooks, high kicks. A chokehold. Jonathan retaliated, his steel hand blocking a punch, delivering a kick to Marcus's knee, forcing him to kneel. He extended his blade, slashing horizontally, leaving a cut across Marcus's chest. The assassin roared, stabbing a dagger into Jonathan's hip, drawing blood. But he endured the pain, locked Marcus in a chokehold, and smashed his head against a machine, knocking him down again. Victor seized the opportunity, lunging forward, his dagger aimed at Jonathan's chest. He dodged, but the knife grazed his arm, drawing more blood. Emily, refusing to just stand by, grabbed an iron bar and struck Victor hard on the back, causing him to stagger. "Don't touch my father," she yelled, her voice full of determination. Jonathan used the moment, delivering a steel punch to Victor's face, sending him flying backward into an old machine, knocking him unconscious. The factory fell silent, leaving only the sound of Jonathan's and Emily's heavy breathing. He turned, checking on his daughter. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice gentle. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I believe in you." "Dad," she whispered, hugging him tightly. Jonathan squeezed her hand, relieved. But he knew Marcus was still a threat. He turned back and saw the assassin had vanished, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. "He's not dead," Jonathan muttered, his gaze turning sharp and cold. The father and daughter left the factory, stepping out into the dawn light. Jonathan put Emily in a truck he took from Victor's men. "We're going to America. To live with your aunt," he said, starting the engine. Emily clutched the silver ring and nodded, feeling safe with her father for the first time. But in his heart, Jonathan knew that Marcus Kane was still lurking somewhere, and the ghost of the Black Eagle Syndicate had not yet vanished. The truck sped through the deserted streets of Madrid, heading for the airport. Jonathan looked at Emily, his heart filled with resolve. He had lost 15 years, but now he had his daughter by his side. Even if Marcus returned, he would train Emily, turning her into a warrior to confront evil. Their journey was not over, but today they had won.